Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this new series of responding to the Shubuhat, responding to the major Shubuhat, the doubts that people approach Islam with. We're going to really do two things in this series, and we've spoken about this in private, but we should let the people at home know. We're going to deal with two levels of Shubuhat. One of them are the common Shubuhat against Islam, and the level two will be the common shubuhat about the Muslim community, about Islam as a civilization, about Islam in practice, really. And these are the kind of, you could call them the higher level shubuhat, which people in academic environments, political commentators, historians, academics, whatever, will make. So today we're going to start with the first, probably the most notorious, really, and prominent type of shubha, which is that Islam allows the killing of innocent people. And by that they mean the killing of non-combatants, people like women, people like children, and so on. And this is couched in the greater context of jihad. They say this is what jihad is, and jihad is really this way in which Islam can expand itself and kill as many people in the process, or convert as many people by force in the process. These are the kinds of things we've heard in the past, historically and contemporaneously. So what we're going to be doing, inshallah, is we're going to be looking at the salient and prominent kinds of points that are used for and against this notion. And we're going to start with, obviously, the most important aspects, including, but not limited to, the objectives of jihad. What jihad even means as a linguistic term, the objectives of jihad. We're going to be talking about the ayat in the Quran, which are used against us, to try and indicate that Islam is the killing of innocent people and non-combatants and so on. And then some ahadiths, some prominent ahadiths that as well. And we're going to be looking at the the madhahib, like the Shafi'i madhab or the Maliki and the Hanbali madhab and so on, and the Hanafi madhab. But what the schools of thought have said about these matters. And we're going to be looking at some common things that Orientalists say, and how to respond to them, as well as work which has already been done in the field of apologetics. So that's quite a lot to do, but we do, inshallah, have an all-star team here today, and all of them are equipped with research, and I'm just going to facilitate this. So I'm going to really leave it to them. And the more we do these sessions, the idea is really in this kind of syllabi that we have in Sapience Institute, is to become more and more hands-off. Started off with a lecture-heavy style, and then you guys do more of the work as we go along, and then afterwards the stabilizer will come off completely. And that's how learning should be. It should be an active process rather than a passive one. So let's get started, inshallah. Let's start with the objectives of what is jihad, first of all, and what are its objectives. Tahmeen, please get us started.
So, Bismillah. So, when we're talking about jihad, obviously related to shubuhat, specifically, the fighting, the outer jihad, right? Not the jihad and nafs that we're talking about. Talking about jihad against, people who are, not Muslim, people who are oppressing us, things like this. So, particularly fighting, and it's important that when we talk about jihad, we remember that that fighting, it wasn't initially prescribed in order to bring people into Islam, and neither was it to spread Islam, right, initially, but rather it was to stop people from persecuting the Muslims. So until the disbelievers at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, until they desist from the persecution of the Muslims, then we are allowed to be hostile towards them. And this is a realistic approach, and this is a pragmatic approach.
Before you continue, in particular, what a verse springs to mind, you can answer this or someone else can, when it comes for the initial prescription to do jihad as a result of the persecution.
So in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah, I believe the verse 190, which is chapter 2 of the Quran, by the way, Allah says, fight in the cause of Allah against those who wage war against you, but do not exceed the limits.
That's good. Okay, so you got 190.
Yeah.
قَاتِلُوا الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. Yeah? But there's another verse which I'm thinking about before you continue, because you made a good point, but we want to evidence it before you continue. Go ahead, Shakir.
Yeah, so they say it's the first verse that was revealed relating to jihad in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hajj.
Good. Okay, what verse is that?
So the Arabic, that أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. that
which translates to
that the permission has been given to those who have been fought, basically to take up arms, because they've been wronged, because they've been oppressed.
Good. And the shahid here is what, or the main point of emphasis?
Is that the reason that they've been given permission to fight is because they've been aggressed upon.
And how do you know that?
The people are oppressing them, because the ayah is very clear about that.
What does it say? What part of the ayah?
بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا.
بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. Okay. You know, Abdul Halim, the translator of the Quran, says something very important about this. He goes that this, the fact that this was the context, the persecution was the context of it, is clear because he says it's couched in language of justification. Because if it was just like free for all, why? What it would be superfluous to mention بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. You don't need to mention that. If there's no dhulm, if it's yani dhulm or no dhulm, it doesn't matter. So بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا was important here because it shows that there's some issues, that there's a response to something. Continue, please. You were saying.
Yeah. So again, like you mentioned, like these languages of justification, and again, like another ayat in Surah Baqarah, verse 193, which is to fight against them if they persecute you until there is no more persecution, and the religion is for Allah alone. And if they stop persecuting against you, then then do not be hostile against them, except for those who transgress, except for those who oppress you. Right.
What are you mentioning?
This is 2193.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Surah Baqarah, yeah.
Yeah. So again, like it's important to remember that this gradual implementation of jihad, and Ibn al-Qayyim, like he outlines this in Zad al-Ma'ad, and he says that the Prophet ﷺ, initially he came to warn the people, and then he was given permission to migrate after being oppressed for a number of years. He was given permission to migrate to Medina, and then after that he was given permission to fight against those who oppressed him.
That's good, mashallah, well done. That's good. Do you want to add to that? Have you got anything more?
Yeah.
So how would you summarize the objectives of jihad, therefore?
So to summarize the objectives of jihad, initially it is to stop those who oppress you, right? So if you're being oppressed, then this is an objective of jihad, which is to free yourself and the other Muslims from persecution, to allow them to practice their religion in safety.
Okay, that's jihad al-difa', or the defensive jihad. What about jihad al-talab, the offensive one?
Yeah, so in terms of the offensive jihad, the objectives of this is first of all to remove any fitna which other people may be causing to a land or a group of people. So if there is an oppressive leader who's oppressing his subjects, his people of his land, then we are encouraged to go fight against him, to liberate the people, and to introduce them to Islam.
Okay, and do you have to force the people to become Muslim?
No, so
civilians.
So the objective is to basically take over the system which is in place at the moment. Just like every other ideology in the world, makes a truth claim, that their ideology is the best, capitalism or communism, right? Islam also makes this case. So the idea is to replace these systems with Islam and to allow the people to practice, Islam in peace. And within that, there is also the ability for other religions to practice their religion in peace as well.
Okay, good. Okay, so what would be the objective of jihad al-talab?
So the objective of that
the offensive
jihad is to remove any persecution which other non-Muslims or even Muslims may be causing, but also to spread the religion of Islam.
Okay, good. So what do we call that?
I guess we would call that like expansion, right?
No, something that we do here in the park.
Da'wah.
Da'wah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right?
Yeah.
And there is a hadith which goes to the effect, and the people, Mashaykh can help me out here, is the Prophet ﷺ, he said, كما قال he says, دعني بيني وبين سائر الناس, leave me between me and the people. And interestingly, this is a hadith that is mentioned. So a lot of the scholars, they do say that the maqsad, one of the objectives of jihad, is for da'wah, for that purpose. Now we can do da'wah without having to do jihad, but not many of us do that. now we have to do jihad al-nafs to do da'wah. All right, so nice one. Thank you very much for that. Let's start with now the ayat of the Quran that people use to try and show that Islam is a religion which means that you can kill the non-combatant, the women, the children, the person who has committed no acts. They say that the Quran itself endorses killing of civilians, people that have no combative role. What kind of ayat do they use for this? Yes.
So, do you want to like in relation to the ayats of the Quran?
Yeah.
You want us to mention those ayat that people are using?
Yes, let's start with that.
Okay, so of the most famous verses that people use is basically a lot of the ayats in Surah Tawbah.
Good. Give me one example.
So particularly verse 5 of Surah Tawbah.
Beautiful. Okay, which is?
That once the sacred months have passed, then basically kill the disbelievers wherever you find them. وَخُذُوهُمْ وَاحْصُرُوهُمْ وَاقْعُدُوا لَهُمْ كُلَّ مَرْصَدٍ. That, basically, wait for them at every place of, ambush and that type of thing. And basically, when this is quoted often in public, that's where people stop. And so they'll mention that, a couplet from the ayat, and they won't mention what comes before, what comes after it. And so, basically, the context of the ayat is that it was revealed. The whole surah, the beginning of the surah is basically the Allah doing like bara, declaring that disassociation basically from those disbelievers that had broken initially the peace treaty that was signed, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. That some of the disbelievers that they attacked a tribe that were in sort of allegiance with the Muslims, and so they broke the non-aggression pact that they had at that period of time. And so as a result of that, this was a declaration of the breaking of that treaty. And so the verse isn't sort of, just like every single, because people would have you believe that it means, hunt out every single disbeliever in that type of manner. Because even afterwards, Allah says, puts conditions that, if they intabu aqamu salah wa atu zakat, if they, they seek forgiveness and they pray, they give the zakat and they pray the salah, that type of thing, that, that they should be left. And also, it gives another sort of caveat, which is that if one of them basically comes to you seeking safety or whatever it is, then فَأَجِرْهُ حَتَّى يَسْمَعَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ أَبْلِغْهُ مَأْمَنَهُ. That give him that security until he hears the word of Allah, and then make a way for him. Relating to the breaking of the treaty as well, it's interesting because on the next page of the surah, in the last ayah on that page, Allah says that أَلَا تُقَاتِلُونَ قَوْمًا نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُم. Are you not going to fight a people who broke who broke the treaty, broke the agreement, وَهَمُّوا بِإِخْرَاجِ الرَّسُولِ, and they sort of put effort into basically expelling the messenger of Allah. وَهُمْ بَدَؤُوكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. And it was them who initially started the first aggression.
This is really important, Shakir, and that's well put, because this is the kind of good answer that we will need. It's you don't really need to go far. You just need to look at the ayat before and after, and you'll see there's so many provisions. So many provisions before and after, and the justifications before and after. وَهُمْ بَدَؤُوكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. Why mention that? وَهُمْ بَدَؤُوكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ, unless that was significant, that they started on you first. They tried it first. They tried to attack you first. So that's well done. Another very famous ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. So we've mentioned chapter 9 verse 5, and it should be also mentioned that some mufassirs did actually say it's nasikha. I'm not sure if you come across this. That this abrogates everything that came and all that stuff. The ayat is safe. How do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. So obviously it's a position, and no one mufassir has the ability to. That here's what he says is the definitive statement. But others said that it's not like a complete abrogation. It's sort of more of a thing where, based on the context and the situation, the rules that are supposed to be applied change.
I'll give you one reference that I came across, which is quite interesting, and I didn't expect to find it. It's a Jawab Sahih of Ibn Taymiyyah, and he actually has a whole fasl on this, a whole chapter on Ayat al-Sayf, and he's basically responding to the view that says that it's nasikha lima qabla. However, this is interesting, but the point is, even if it is, like, it doesn't still, that's not enough to show that you can kill innocent non-combatant people.
Yeah.
You see, even if they, even that doesn't show that you can kill the innocent non-combatants, the غير harbi, the non-harbi. I will come to these classifications in a second. They're important ones. What's a harbi? What's a musta'min? And what is a dhimmi? These are the three major. But we'll come to that in a second. That's good. One more ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. Al-Rahman. Yes. Other ayah in Surah At-Tawbah, which is very, very oft repeated. You will definitely come across this. So chapter 9 verse 5. Yeah, okay, but you've answered so many times. Let's spread it around. Okay, Ali's speaking. Look, Ali's on the phone. Look, Ali, yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
Listen to me. Okay, you listen to me when I'm talking.
Okay, yeah.
Surah Tawbah verse 29, bro.
Okay, 29. Do you know how it goes? Anyone? Chapter 9, verse 29.
Basically, fight the people, the Christians and the Jews until they, in a nutshell, pay the jizya.
Yeah, this is Ali mentioned that.
But a lot of people misconstrue this and think 29 and 30 is connected when it's not.
Okay, so this is good because Ali's speaking from experience now because he's been, obviously in Speaker's Corner, Battleground. This is actually the thing they come up with, isn't it, Ali? They come up with this. As a very famous. قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ولا يدينون دين الحق حتى يعطوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون. This is the ayah. It keeps coming up. That fight. Is it fight or is it kill? It's fight. Yeah, fight. It's fight. Yeah. How do we know it's not how do we know it's not kill, Abdul Rahman? Because you know about sarf. Huh?
The word qatala is on the same verb scale as the word fa'ala, which in the Arabic language means that the particular action is taking place between two people. So
yes,
two
right.
types of people.
Yeah. So it's that's the first thing you need to know about the ayah. Yeah. It's qatilu ladina. It's not uqtulu ladina. Yeah. So this is the first thing, and it's a sarfi point. It's lil musharaka. Yes, it's a fa'ala, the Sheikh he's been helping us with sarf, that's why he's nodding along in happiness and the musharaka, yeah. So it's qatilu, it means it's happening on both sides. It's like the hadith, إذا ضارب أحدكم أخاه فليلتقي الوجه فإن الله خلق آدم على صورته إذا قاتل أحدكم أخاه. It's the same thing actually, which is if both of you fight each other, So the word qatala and daraba is actually used in other contexts, in context with Muslims as well, which is interesting. But qatala means the two people are fighting. Now, if the person is fighting, what does that eliminate already? The the non-combatants. So if the thing is that you're saying that Islam attacks combatants, allows the attacking of non-combatants through this verse, all you have to do is show them it's lil musharaka. And how can it be qatala or qatilu? Yeah, how could it be ala wazni fa'ala or on this thing if both parties are not fighting each other? Already they have to be fighting each other.
Same with the hadith.
Yeah, qatil. Yeah, we'll come to the hadith in a second. But you see this point. It's a very subtle, important point. So if they say, well, actually, it means that this means that you can kill the combatants. So if they were combatants, why is it on that? It's called a morphological meter. Sarf is morphology, by the way. That's what it's called. Sarf is morphology. So this is called a morphological meter. Why would it be on this morphological meter, which is qatilu, qatala? Yeah, basically the asl is. If it was meant to be if it was meant to be asymmetrical. So this implies symmetricality. There's two things going on. That's the linguistic point. Yeah? So قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر. Yeah? So it says fight those who don't believe in Allah and the last day. And they don't believe in the true religion. حتى يعطوا الجزية. Have I missed a part? ولا يحرمون ما حرم الله ورسوله ولا يدينون دين الحق حتى يعطوا من الذين أوتوا الكتاب. That's the point. Yeah, من الذين أوتوا الكتاب, from the people who have from the people of the book. Yeah, حتى يعطوا الجزية. Yeah, حتى يعطوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون. Until, and like Ali said, Ali was right. Ali said that, and then they say, because the next verse says, وقالت اليهود عزير ابن الله وقالت النصارى المسيح ابن الله. You know, and the Jews say that this is the Uzair, whoever that may be, because some say it's Ezra, some say it's what's the other one? They say it's eunuch. Some people say it's eunuch as well, by the way. We're not going to translate Uzair. Just leave Uzair for now. Just write Uzair. Okay, we don't know who Uzair is. If he's Ezra or eunuch, just for the sake of argument. Enoch, sorry. Astaghfirullah. Enoch, yeah. Is the son of Allah, and the Christians say that Jesus is, yeah. That this is the ذلك قولهم بأفواههم يعني يضاهئون قول الذين كفروا من قبل قاتلهم الله أن يؤفكون, yeah, that they copy those who came before them, and that, you know. So they try and say, this is their line of argumentation, by the way. They say the reason why you have to fight them is because, so they've made it what you call ta'lili. They've made it causative. They say the reason why you have to fight them is because what? Because they believe in that these ones are the sons of God, whoever, Uzair or Jesus. Do you see the faulty argumentation? Yeah.
Out of curiosity, because obviously Jews are included in this as well.
Yeah.
So obviously, ethnically at least, the Prophet ﷺ married a Jew.
No, that's fine. That's a separate argument. But if something is going to be because of something, you need something in Arabic.
Yeah.
You need like li'anna.
Sababi or something.
Something sababi, innit? This is because يعني ذلك بأنهم. There's nothing like that. So it doesn't say that ذلك, this is because they believe in Jesus as the Son of God, and it doesn't say that. So the bayyina of the burden of proof is upon the one who's making the claim. If they're saying that it's because this is what they actually say. This is what we hear. They say the reason why you have to fight them is because they are Jews and Christians. So we say, but that's not what the ayah says. The ayah just says وقالت. So it could be واو للاستئناف, starting with a new sentence. It doesn't say this is because you have to fight them because of that reason. Do you see the point? So that nullifies this point that Ali was just mentioning. I don't know where he was. But within the script now, how would you respond to this ayah? This ayah does not really require response, because does not prove the fact that there is fighting towards combatants. All it proves is that you can fight, or you should fight, those empires around you, or those hukumat around you, which are Jew or Christian, like the Roman Empire and like the Persian Empire, until they give the jizya. That's fine. That we already know Islam allows. And then the howness of that is in the hadith. The three options that they're given: either you give the jizya, or you do this, or you do that. Yeah, we're not apologetic about that point. That is truth. But we're not saying that this doesn't prove that what they can kill who, the combatants. It doesn't say that. It just means that you can fight the other powers, which are Christian and Jewish. That their hukuma, the power centers are Christian and Jewish. And you should fight them, because it's in Sighat al-Amr. Okay, we don't disagree with that. But we already have our line of argumentation, which is what? Which is that if you don't fight them, they'll fight you, and they'll take you into their empire. And why should we have? And they won't even allow the Muslims to come and do dawah into their places. So all of these are points. Assalamu alaikum. Is that for me? Yeah? Thank you very much. Just put it on the table. I'm joking. Okay, thanks, shukran. Thank you. So okay, these are so far. How many ayahs have we mentioned? We've mentioned two main ones. Okay, so give me two more main ayahs that you have heard that non-Muslims use, or people that want to attack Islam in particular use, to try and say that Islam attacks non-combatants. Let's see anybody else first. Yes, Mahdi, what do you say?
That Islam attacks non-combatants.
Yeah. What about that ayah that you were talking about the other day, that in the back of the Quran?
Would they use the story of Khidr?
No, they wouldn't. They don't usually use that for that reason. Yeah, they will use something like that.
وَيَقَاتِلُونَكُمْ كَافَةً.
Yeah, that's like Surah Al-Anfal, right? So the ayah, قاتلوا المشركين كافة كما يقاتلونكم كافة. That fight the mushrik, the polytheists, all together, just like they are fighting you all together. So what is the answer? It's maybe already in the self-contained in the ayah. What is the answer?
Because they are already fighting you.
كما يقاتلونكم كافة. Okay, what you want to do? Fight them just like they're doing with you. You do it with them. There's no controversy there. What else? What other ayahs did they use in the Quran? Did we already mention that one?
No.
Okay, but that's verse 6, right? It's connected to فَإِذَا انْسَلَخَ الْأَشْهُرُ الْحُرُمُ.
No, this is Surah. Yeah,
Oh.
Surah Al-Baqarah.
Oh, okay. Which one are you guys on?
There's 190 to 191.
Where is this? Okay, so this is like the set 89, yeah? Is that right? Can we check that? And then the next ayah is إِلَى الَّذِينَ يَصِلُونَ إِلَى قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُم مِيثَاقٌ أَوْ جَاءُوكُمْ حَصِرَتْ صُدُورُهُم, right?
Yeah.
Is that the next ayah? Well, that's the ayah, that's the answer, isn't it? So okay, let's look at that is an ayah that we use. If they come with Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 89. How does it? Someone read it for me, please.
ودوا لو تكفرون كما كفروا فتكونون سواء فلا تتخذوا منهم أولياء حتى يهاجروا في سبيل الله فإن تولوا فخذوهم وقتلوهم حيث وجدتموهم ولا تتخذوا منهم وليا ولا نصيرا.
Okay, this is 89, right? إلا الذين يصلون is 90, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, that 90 is unabrogated, so that's a very important one. There's no naskh on that. Not that any classical scholar speaks about. So it's this. Can you translate that? You didn't translate that, by the way. Because if you read 89 by itself, it looks like a chapter 4 verse 89. It looks like it's they've got the gold bullet, right?
89, shall I read in English?
So this is
Yeah, Ali, please read it. Yeah.
Okay, they wish that you should disbelieve as they have disbelieved, and thus you become all alike. So do not take friends from among them unless they migrate in the way of Allah. Then if they turn away, seize them and kill them wherever you find them, and do not take from among them friend or helper.
That's 89. Look, can you read 90?
90 is, except those who join a group between whom and you there is a treaty, or who come to you with their hearts feeling discomfort in fighting against you or against their own people. If Allah had so willed, He would have given them power over you, then they would have fought you. So if they stay away from you and do not fight you and offer you peace, then Allah has not given you any authority against them.
There you have it. You know, so all you have to do is just another case of just read the next ayah. So they give you 89, but you just have to read 90, and then it actually solves your problem. Chapter 4 verse 90 is one of the most definitive ayahs in the Quran that indicate non-aggressive stances to non-combatants or peaceful people. Because look at this. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ يَصِلُونَ إِلَىٰ قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ مِيثَاقٌ أَوْ جَاءُوكُمْ حَصِرَ صُدُورُهُم. That they come basically bare-chested. Like they're saying, we don't want to fight. We don't want to fight. So if you don't want to fight, Allah is saying, don't fight those ones. Fight the ones who fight you. Don't fight the ones who come and say, look, we want to do a peace treaty. You see? All right, so that's good.
There's one in 195. Have you guys done Surah Baqarah 190 to 194? But if you go to 95, I don't know, this is not quite popular. But if you go to the ayah, what it says is basically attack them the way they have attacked you in the same manner. So some people actually, I don't know if certain groups have already done this. So they'll say they've killed our innocents. We will attack the innocents, and this ayah proves this.
Yeah. So this is exactly what Ibn. Sorry, I'm not going to say who from that side, but who Bin Laden what he used.
Yeah, this is the ayah.
Yeah, he used this. Bin Laden used this ayah. That was his ayah to prove that you can kill innocent people.
Wow. So how do
So you tell me.
Well, from I don't know, from the tafsir that I read, it does say very categorically and clear. Even quotes Abu Bakr radiallahu anh that he said, when going to warfare, do not harm men, women, children, etc. And I think the tafsir does say, it doesn't even mention anything like that. Like it doesn't even use that. Like the early, the Salaf never saw it and understood it in this way at all.
Okay, so in Usul Fiqh, we'll go to Usul now. which this is why it's important. This is almost an Islamic studies lesson. It's good the sheikhs are here, because any mistakes that we make, the sheikhs will, get involved. In usul fiqh, you have two types of verse. You have the general and the specific. Okay, no problem. Yeah. So if there's a general verse and there's no specific verse, then what happens?
Then it's general.
Then it just stays on its generality.
Okay.
All right. But is there some specifiers to this ayah? Okay. وَقَاتِلُوا الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, and then all the way up to 195. Yeah. Are there specifiers? What does 195 say?
Sorry, 194, not 95.
What does 194 say?
Okay, it says the holy month for the holy month, and the sanctities are subject to retribution. So when anyone commits
فَمَنْ
aggression,
اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ فَاعْتَدُوا عَلَيْهِ بِمِثْلِ مَا اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ. Right?
so when anyone commits aggression
Yeah.
against you, be aggressive against them in the like manner as he did
Okay,
against
beautiful.
you.
So they're saying that good. So this is let's put the argument forward. Bin Laden and co. and Ayman al-Zawahiri and ISIS, but less so ISIS, to be honest, and more so Al-Qaeda and these other takfiri type groups, they all say, look, be mithli ma'tada. So how did they do it to you? They killed your children. So what you should do to them was what? Kill their children. That's what they say. Remember, we did a session on takfirism, and remember Abu Qatada, we talked about the guy with the huge beard that was in this country, the Jordanian guy. He wrote a book. He actually made a fatwa some time ago. He said that, he said in Algeria they should kill the children or something like that. Very famous fatwa. And then everyone disavowed it. He made tawbah after. He repented. But why? Because of this ayah. This is where they got it. So now we go to, first of all, is this ayah telling you to kill non-combatants? No, it's not. Okay, clear. So it's an inference of a general verse. But my question now is there anything specific in Islam, Quran or Hadith, which explicitly tells us you cannot kill non-combatants? That's my question. Now go ahead. Yeah.
So you have the verse, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم.
Okay, this is one verse.
Yeah.
Chapter 60, verse 8, I'm sure you... okay. But let's be more specific.
ومن قتل مؤمنا
That's mu'minan. So they'll say these are not...
نفسا بغير نفس.
Yeah, but that's general as well.
That's general.
So they'll say the two general verses, yeah, you don't have a specifier yet.
We have a hadith of anyone that harms a person, but it's the dhimmi. Like he will not smell the fragrance of.
Alright, so this hadith, من قتل معاهدا لم يرح رائحة الجنة. This is an important hadith, because what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentions in this sharh of the hadith, he says that actually this, when he says mu'ahadan, because there's three categories. Let's first start with that. There's the dhimmi, who is under this Islamic state and is paying the taxes, or there's a zakat, yeah. And then you have the musta'min, and it's also musta'man. I don't know which one is the correct one. Which one is the better one? Is it better musta'man? I've heard it being said both ways, but the Shaykh said musta'man, we'll use musta'man from now on. No one's going to change the situation. And also you have so we said the dhimmi, the musta'man, yeah, the mu'ahad, and the harbi. These are the four categories of non-Muslims, according to Islamic law. The dhimmi is the person who is not Muslim but is paying Islamic taxes, and that's fine. The mu'ahad is someone who's been entered into a contract somehow. And they could have been entered into the contract of ahd through any means. And nowadays we have different ways of doing that. Some argue citizenship, some argue whatever, yeah? Then you have the musta'man, which is someone who has been granted immunity, if you like, safety. And he can be granted that safety from anybody. Can even be granted that safety from, a child. Some scholars say a child, some scholars say a slave, and some scholars... So you come into a land and you say you've been granted security, then that person is safe.
What's the exact phraseology? Like what is the word you have to use?
Musta'man.
No. What do you say that the person? Do you say this person is under my protection?
Sheikh, what was the exact? What would be the thing that they have to say? To grant the musta'man, to grant him his rights.
To be protected.
To amen.
So if a non-Muslim comes to the land, Sheikh, what do we say to them verbally that they're under protection? Is there a specific word, or can you just say anything? He's under my protection. I protect him.
Anything.
Or is it anything?
Anything that indicates it, right?
Anything that indicates it.
Yeah, anything that indicates it. Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, anything that indicates it, the Sheikh said. Yeah, so that's the musta'man. And then you have the harbi. The harbi now is the one that you can fight. Because the harbi literally means the combatant. That's how you would define a harbi, a combatant. That's you can fight him. And so that's the combatant. But what would you expect to do with the combatant? I mean, except to go into combat with him. Anyway, so these are the 4 categories. The reason why I was saying that is because going back to the point, this hadith is actually quite important. Because Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he said of the hadith that says, "Man qatala mu'ahadan lam yarih ra'ihat al-jannah." Whoever kills, and so basically he says the mu'ahad here is not talking about the 3rd category of 4. He said mu'ahad here includes the dhimmi and the musta'man. That's what Ibn Hajar says about this. He says in this hadith, it's istilahi. It's not, the istilah is not used here. It's like yani, we're not talking about the mu'ahad only. He says that it includes also the musta'man and the dhimmi. Which means what? If you really wanted to translate it, it means all the categories except for which? The harbi. So if we wanted to explain the hadith, we say whoever kills a non-combatant, non-believer, he will never smell the fragrance of Jannah. It's done, really, isn't it? The job has been done. But then they'll turn back. And I remember as a young man listening to Anwar al-Awlaqi. I used to listen to the seerah, and he had probably one of the best styles, in terms of speech, in terms of eloquence, in terms of the mix and all that. But he would say something. He would always put something in that in the context, which would be, he's got an agenda, and the agenda was not dissimilar from the Al-Qaeda agenda. Of course, the Awlaqiyya tribe where he's from Yemen, were all, not all of them, but they were connected to Al-Qaeda. And so you have to remember that. I met a Yemeni one time. He was from a tribe which is nearing, and he said, "Look, you need to because I was a young man. I want to know about this guy Anwar al-Awlaqi." He said, "You've got to understand that actually his tribe was they were all involved in that. And when he went to prison, he was pushed into it already. So he already had the seeds plowed into him from a young age when he used to go to Yemen." But anyway, he would say things like, well, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba would go into an expedition, and they would kill the mushrikeen, and then they would go back to the Prophet Muhammad, and some of them were non-combatant, and they would go to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and they would say, "Hum minhum." It's a hadith Sahih Muslim. They are part of them. Make it seem like, don't worry about it. They've been killed, but they're part of it. They are part of the collateral damage. How would you respond to such a thing, Abdul Rahman?
So, very famously, you're referring to the incident that took place when some companions went on an expedition, and they ended up killing some of the children and women of the combatants. Unintentionally, it was like collateral damage, right? And they came back to the Prophet ﷺ and they explained to him what happened, and he said, "Wahum minhum." But I don't know whether it's intentionally or not, but they always forget to mention that in the narration of Ahmed, he mentions that.
Do you want to read out?
Let me just get up here. Yeah, that
get out.
We have Az-Zuhri that says, وَنَهَى عَنْ ذَلِكَ بَعْدُ. So after that incident, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited any Muslim doing that.
Yeah, which is and is it istihdaf? Was it like go and kill?
No, it was not.
All right,
it was collateral damage.
It was unintended.
Yes.
And the Prophet says, "Hum minhum." Okay, is there any other hadith that indicates that very clearly, that I'm sure some here are aware of, that just because people are disbelievers, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you can kill them. Yeah, go ahead, Abdul Rahman. You haven't got it. Well, I'll give you 3 minutes to research that one, and I'll let everybody else research that one as well. And in the meantime, I'll see you guys later, and you can speak to the person next to you, because we need to make sure we have these references in place. 3 minutes, and we'll be back to speak about it. Alright, so let's come back now. We've hopefully done a bit of research, sharpened the tools. Abdul Rahman, what you got for us? Yeah.
Okay, so one of the companions said, غزوت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم 4 غزوات. I went on 4 expeditions with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. قال فتناول قوم الذرية بعدما قتلوا المقاتلة. So there was a specific number of companions who accidentally killed some of the family members of the combatants. فبلغ ذلك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and that news reached the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فقال ألا ما بال أقوام قتلوا المقاتلة حتى تناولوا الذرية. He said, what's wrong with the people who fight until they kill the innocent, the family members of the combatants. فقال رجل يا رسول الله, a man said, O Messenger of Allah, أوليس أبناء المشركين, are they not the children of the polytheists? قال فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن خياركم أبناء المشركين. The Prophet replied and said, indeed the best of you are the children of polytheists.
Fantastic. So, which indicates what?
Which indicates that the action itself wasn't good.
Yeah, and that if that was a reasoning, then what?
If that was, sorry?
If the reasoning was that they were non-believers, then the Sahaba themselves, were, a lot of them were non-believers before, right?
Yep, exactly.
Excellent. Now, where is this mentioned, this hadith?
The Musnad of Imam Ahmed.
The great Imam Ahmed, of course, you know, and there's the sanad. What's wrong with the sanad? Is there anything wrong with the sanad? Is there some kalam on the sanad?
Yeah, there is some kalam on the sanad.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll tell you one there isn't any kalam on the sanad on, which is that when Khalid ibn Walid, when they went into Mecca, and he killed some of the innocent people, and he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Ana bari'u mimma sana'ahu Khalid," or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that I am disassociated from what Khalid did. And it's interesting that he did not say I am disassociated from Khalid himself, but he said, "Ana bari'u mimma fa'alahu or sana'ahu Khalid." I am disassociated from what he has done. And what did he do? He killed some people who were non-combatants.
It's a woman specifically.
I don't know how many people there were, the details. I don't know the details.
The hadith says
Yeah.
that he saw a woman. It was, I don't
No,
know.
that's a different hadith.
Oh, different.
That's a different.
So it's a different.
That's actually a good thing you brought that up, because ما كان عليها أن تقتل is a hadith I think in Sahih Muslim. When the Prophet ﷺ, he saw a woman in the battlefield and she was killed, he said it wasn't for her to be killed. And what did Abu Bakr as-Siddiq say about killing the innocents and cutting the trees and stuff like that?
He gave 10
Please.
rulings.
Yeah.
I don't know specifically, but not to harm men, women, children, elderly, trees, monks. That's what I remember. I think it was 10 in total.
Does anyone know the exact one?
She gave a direct commandment.
Yeah.
Monks and women, children,
Do you want to say in Arabic?
slaves, and yeah, that's what I remember.
Okay, good. Yeah, perfect. All right. And this is what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq he mentioned.
Yeah.
So is this enough evidence?
There's one more evidence. I don't know if you can. It's not specific hadith or Quran, but it's a principle. Like you said before when I was listening on the phone, that you said the whole concept of jihad is to give dawah. So how can you give dawah to people you're going to kill? And if you think about it, it's like, okay, we want you to come to Islam, but if our religion teaches that we should be killing non-combatants, it defeats the whole purpose of us to start jihad. The whole purpose is what? To fight the powers that are controlling these masses. You want to break those shackles so they can hear the message of Allah. So this doesn't defeat the purpose of Islam's principles that want to give dawah to these people, but yet again you believe that we're out there to kill them. It defeats the whole purpose. We want them alive. We don't want them to die. We want them to hear the message of Islam, even if they accept it or not. Can we not say this?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Okay.
I think that is a good point. This is very good. I'm happy with the responses so far. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say? Yeah.
Just for the sake of so we cover all these things, there's two things I want to mention. First is to address the idea that some people say that, like you mentioned with the abrogation, that there's a sort of like a temperamental shift that happens once you enter Medina, and that's when apparently the Muslims become more violent and it's the blood is halal. Obviously you have the verse in Baqarah that there's no compulsion in religion, that you're not allowed to force any person to become a Muslim, which is important because when people hear the idea of war with maybe say a religious underpinning or religious incentive, they attach it to, I guess, a history of sectarian conflicts where people are being burned at the stake and whatever to be forced to convert to religion. So it's very explicit in the Quran that you're not allowed to do that. But then also, as far as the argument from reciprocity is concerned, that they're killing us so we're going to kill them in the same way, there's a really good example from the Madani Sirah. So they mentioned in the tafsir that of Surah Nahl, it's a Makki surah apart from the last 3 ayat, and in there Allah says that وَإِنْ عَقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُقِبْتُمْ بِهِ, that if they basically
if you are
transgress the point or whatever happens, that you should basically respond in the same way.
Yeah.
وَلَئِنْ صَبَرْتُمْ فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لِلصَّالِحِينَ. I think that's the ayah, that if you're patient then it's better for those who are righteous. And so as far as the context of the ayah, There's another sort of, sorry, but some say that it's weak, but the stronger one from what I've read is that basically it mentions in the riwayah that obviously at Badr, obviously you had 60 of the Ansar that were killed and 4 of the Muhajirun. And so when they went to conquer Mecca, people said things like, that there's no Quraysh after today, that today's the day of slaughter and that type of thing. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said this ayah was revealed at that time, that's what they're saying. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't go ahead and kill 60 or 64 in the same way as they did to him, but he actually chose a path of greater mercy and forgave all of them and said that, that there's no sort of la tathriba alaykum al-yawm, that there's no sort of retribution against you today. And so it's a very strong evidence against.
These are all good, really good points of evidence. Now, what would say people who want to put forward the expansionist narrative? Tariq, what do you think what do they say, and what are their main arguments?
Well, obviously, when we're dealing with an empire like Persia on one side and Rome on another side, and you're in the middle and you're a tribal culture, you're going to get crushed once they see that there's unity between the tribes. Initially, after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he took over and he became Khalifa. He had to deal immediately with a series of rebellions among the tribes, which were the Ridda wars, the wars of apostasy. So, and it was during these particular battles that the brilliance of the field commanders Khalid bin Walid and Umar bin Khattab was distinguished, and subsequently he initiated the expansion of the nascent empire into the Byzantine and the Persian empires. So this was kind of unheard of for this ragtag bunch of tribes to challenge not one but 2 superpowers. So he initiated that. The subsequent Khalifa, he only reigned for two years, unfortunately. And then there was Umar bin Khattab. He was Khalifa for 10 years exactly. It was during his Khilafat that the Rashidun, the Islamic Empire, saw its biggest expansion, and it encompassing 2 continents. And it covered 2,200,000 square miles and 4,050 cities. He conquered the Levant, Egypt, modern Libya, eastern Turkey, Anatolia, and a vast majority of the Sassanid Persian Empire, as far as Makran in Balochistan. He was a strong and just ruler who initiated many policies that we can recognize as the staple of the welfare state. So we can see many of these things in our life today, the initiatives that he did. His expansion was tempered by his desire to consolidate the enormous empire. So he knew he couldn't expand too far because it would be impossible to control. And one curious thing is he was reluctant to use naval warfare. He was invited twice by Muawiyah to conquer Syria by the sea, but twice he actually rejected that notion. He was focused on concentrating this enormous empire. After him we had Osman radiallahu anhu. He ruled from 644 to 656, and within his period, in 655, we can say that the Islamic Caliphate encompassed 6,400,000 square kilometers, which is enormous. And it was in his reign that a further expansion was made into Persia. He completed the conquest of Persia up until Balochistan, and that became fully under the laws of the Khilafah. And he extended the realm into Morocco as well, and north into Armenia and Azerbaijan. And he established the first Islamic naval force as well. That was the first time. He defeated the Byzantine navy in the Battle of Damascus in 655, opening up the Mediterranean Sea to the Muslims. The final rightly guided Khalifa was Ali radiallahu anhu, and he was Khalifa from 656 to 661. and his was a turbulent reign. Unfortunately, he was kind of prevented from further expansion by trying to again consolidate this vast empire, and it was during his it was because of the events that happened during his reign that he was assassinated, unfortunately, which resulted in the first Islamic civil war.
Well, these are all really important points. Is there any evidence, Tariq, of these caliphs going into different empires and forcibly converting the non-combatant population?
Well, there's evidence that they sent emissaries and various letters cordially inviting to those to the religion, and in some cases they were mentioned that they were very rudely rejected. And obviously the main point that we have to remember is that it was either they expanded or they got contracted. They would have been obliterated.
I think that's it's almost a memorizable statement there. Either expanded or get contracted, they would have been obliterated. It's a very good way of putting it, because that is the international relations realist framework. There were no organizations like the UN. Not to say that these organizations are any good. They are basically an extension of the US. But there were no after World War II, the League of Nations or anything like that. So this is a kind of anachronism that a lot of people face. Because we are living in a post-World War II environment, with the League of Nations, then turned UN and IMO and the WHO, IMF, all that stuff. The people almost think that stuff existed 1,000 years ago. That didn't exist 1,000 years ago. Not even 500. Not even 100 years ago. And it was all against all. And it has always been like that. Until very fairly recently. That's why you have things like what is referred to now as Pax Americana. Because you have America as the superpower, it checks all the other nations. No one else wants to fight them because of how strong they are. But when you have countries which are of similar strength and size, there's more conflict that happens. It's like when you have a big father in the house, then you have the children behave themselves. But if you leave the kids alone in the house, they fight each other. Domestic violence happens, by the way, mostly with homosexual partners.
Really?
I just want to wake you guys up by telling you something, which is why? Because they're equal strength. If there's a man and a woman, then there's a disparity in strength.
Is that a study?
Yeah, it's a very high level, like lesbian domestic violence, very high, homosexual, very high, because it's equality in strength. It's the same thing in households as it is in world in countries.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Absolutely, and there's a verse there in the Quran that indicates that. Where is it?
It's about Allah. If there was more than two, they would fight.
No, that's a different verse. I'm thinking of there's two verses that ولولا دفع
الناس بعضهم
ببعض. There's two ayahs. There's one that says
ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض.
That's in Baqarah. So what does this verse mean? Who remembers? Who wants to get it out and translate it for us? Nice, clean, good translation. Yeah.
I don't know how to say it in English.
Well, and the other one is, what's the other ayah first? ولولا دفع الناس بعضهم ببعض لهدمت
صلوات ومساجد يذكر فيها اسم الله كثيرا.
Yeah, and that's in
Hajj.
So what is this ayah telling us? Let's
saying.
Well, in Baqarah one first.
Yeah, this is in Baqarah. It's basically talking about how some people have been given permission and authority over others. So saying, and had Allah, this is after the story of Dawood and Jalut. Had Allah not driven back some people by means of others, the earth would surely be corrupted, and Allah is bountiful to all His creatures.
Okay, and the other one?
And in Surah Hajj, Allah says, those who have been unjustly driven from their homes only because they say, our Lord is Allah, for had it not been for repelling by Allah some men by means of others, the monasteries and churches, the synagogues and mosques, in which the name of Allah is frequently remembered, would surely have been destroyed. Surely Allah helps the one who helps him. Allah is indeed powerful, mighty.
Yeah. I mean, يذكر في اسم الله. Some say that's just talking about a masajid, by the way. Because anyway, but the point is, sometimes fighting is necessary. But if it happens all the time, then it will just be perpetual. So the pacifists, this is basically, it's a polemic against pacifism. If you think about it, the Quran refutes pacifism. And a lot of the questions people ask have pacifistic assumptions. Which is why I want you guys to remember one thing at this point, and then we'll go to the Orientalists, what they say, because you've got something, haven't you, for us, yeah? And you have. No, you've got, what have you got today for us?
It was an extension of expansionism.
Oh, okay, good. We'll come to that in a second. Actually, if it's an extension of expansionism, can you tell us right now? Let's go to yeah, let's do that, and then I'll tell you how to answer these questions. Yeah, go on. Yeah. Well, please continue the expansionism.
To be honest, I don't have much to say. Apart from the fact that when Muslims invaded new cities, they were given specific orders that they were not allowed to enter into the cities and basically take away people's homes. They were made to build garrison towns surrounding the cities, and the Muslims who the Muslim soldiers would live in the garrison towns around them. Even though this frustrated some soldiers who basically wanted to loot, the Caliph at the time was very serious about this, about not doing so. This eventually led to some problems with some people rebelling against Caliph like Usman radiallahu anhu, but they were strict on this issue. So that was one point I wanted to mention. Apart from that, I don't think I have anything to say.
Well, you made a very good point. Yeah. Furqan, how about you? Tell us what you've learned today. You've done Orientalism, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, tell us what you picked up.
So I wanted to find Orientalism first. Edward Said.
Yeah.
He defined. He wrote a book, 1978, called Orientalism, and in this book he tries to argue that a dominant European political ideology created the notion of Orient to basically subjugate and control the narrative about Middle East, North Africa, Asia. So he explains that the concept embodies distinct between East, meaning Orient, and West, meaning Occident. Precisely so the West could control control and authorize the views of the East. This nexus of power and knowledge enables the West to basically generalize and misrepresent North Africa and and Middle East and even Asia. So starting from this premise, it would be of no surprise if these Orientalists they also misinterpret jihad or other Islamic teachings. So it's commonly assumed that for West, jihad refers exclusively to aggression. And that assumption. So also most Western academics will focus exclusively on the aggressive dimensions of jihad, and they will use the Quranic text as we mentioned before.
Beautiful. Actually, this is a really good point what you're saying now, because I like the fact that you're now bringing in questioning the assumption, because that should be the very first thing we do when we deal with these kind of shubuhat. Every shubuha has an assumption, and it's our job to unpack that assumption. Now, bringing in Orientalism here is very important, because obviously there's a whole school of thought now called post-colonialism, and Edward Said, he wrote this book. He was a Christian Palestinian. He wrote a book which is basically studied in almost any course of sociology or anthropology or, I don't know, even maybe psychology, almost all this, even philosophy, yeah, which is called Orientalism. No surprises there. And he was one of many pioneers that started off this school of thought. Another one would be Frantz Fanon. You should know these names. These are important names. These are very important names. Okay, he was another post-colonial writer. Post-colonial writers are very important. And we're not saying we agree with all of the assumptions that Edward Said had made. He had postmodernist assumptions. He had Gramscian assumptions, in fact, Marxist assumptions, and other assumptions. But he made some really, really good points. And that book was a classic, undoubtedly one of the most remarkable books and one of the most strongest arguments made in the 20th century. Undoubtedly that. And the way he writes in English is phenomenal, to say the very least. I mean, if you've just read the introduction of that book, if you haven't, you really should. If you want to grow in cultural capital and understand what the discourses and the narratives are, that book, at least 2 or 3 chapters of it, is actually a must read. Otherwise, you will not understand some of the things on the high level, when especially we go to level 2. But what he does, which is very good and very important, is he shows us that Orientalists, or people who are elite speakers or narrative knowledge producers, in the West, they position the Orient, which is like the Eastern world, because what's the opposite of Orient is the Occident, where we are. We're the Occident right now. We're in the West. Orient is the East. Okay, so they position themselves in a very privileged position, make it seem as if the precepts that we have are remarkable precepts, are extraordinary precepts. They basically, put it this way, they make us the subject of investigation. And what he does is really powerful. He looks at things like the National Geographic. Even till this day, I can never have the same experience with the National Geographic ever again. I go on the Instagram page of the National Geographic and I see like an African guy there. And they got like an African guy wearing like, this kind of whatever he's wearing. Or I see like an Indian guy or something. Do you get me? And I'm thinking, what about if I made a book or a magazine and just put white people in there? Now, they would think of that as a comical thing, like not white people in there, a fashion magazine or a men's health magazine. I'm talking about as a subject of investigation, almost like you're dealing with animals. Sorry to say, like it's a zoo here. The National and funny enough, in these magazines, you may have one picture of a man and then the next picture is of a giraffe or a zebra or something. And so basically, what does that do? It makes the Orient the subject of investigation. It makes the Orient like you're the other. You're something that we need to look at as a peculiar. You're unusual. It's called otherizing. I'm sure you've heard of this term. It's very important. These terms, and this is something you can learn from we can learn from the Orientalists, are these terms that they use: otherizing, ostracizing, subject of investigation, and sometimes they can even make us the impossible subject. Like whatever you do, the impossible subject. You can't even be. You're an impossible person. So what they'll do with jihad is a beautiful thing for them, because they will use it to do all those things. With jihad, they'll use it in order to say this is why they're different from us. This jihad is why these Muslims are different from us. Yeah.
I don't know if this was in his book, but Edward Said, I saw an interview where he mentions when the Oklahoma bombings happened in America, and he said that the media named it as this looks like a Middle Eastern bombing.
Yeah, interesting.
And he was like, what do you mean by a Middle Eastern bombing? What does a Middle Eastern explosion look like?
That's different from the Western ones, right?
And it was fun. Well, they found out that it was actually fundamental Christians, if I'm not mistaken, that actually took this. And it was, I think it was one of the biggest atrocities that happened in America, in American history. Yeah. So he was like, he was getting like interviews and stuff like that. And he was shocked. He was like, like, what the hell is this? Like a Middle Eastern bombing. Like, what the hell does that mean? So it just shows you, like like you said, for example, the attitude that they take, even to an explosion, that they look at and be like, oh, this looks like a Middle Eastern kind, and it's like,
yes,
yeah,
that's a really good
yeah.
point. And so it's questioning the assumptions, and basically this is the way they want to put it. We need to make sure that they understand that the concept of combative jihad is an unremarkable context, not only in the medieval period, but even contemporaneously. Even now, it's unremarkable. Almost every nation has an inbuilt jihad concept in it. But you're using something, because there's violence involved, you're using it to try and otherize the Muslim people, a whole community of individuals, where there's really there's nothing remarkable about what they're practicing compared to other people, but you want excuse to go into their lands. And one thing I will say, and this is very important, and another line of argumentation, because a lot of this is defensive now, we need to now move on to the offensive and show that in the last 100 years, really sorry to say, but most of the killings have been done at the hands of secular people, nationalists, liberals. Liberalism itself was spread by the sword. Liberalism itself was there alongside colonialism. There's nothing within the framework of liberalism which actually rejects colonialism or slavery or racial slavery or racism. That's very interesting, isn't it? Nothing within liberalism rejects racism, but there is something within Islam that does. Racial slavery and all this. There's lots of things in Islam which reject all of those things. However, this is one point. The second thing is, on the ground, look at World War I and World War II. Just combine the casualties on those two wars. It is probably more than all the casualties in Islamic history, just in these two wars. And there is a book that's actually been written. I've been looking for it. I think it's up here somewhere. Maybe it's up there. It's called War and something. War and Peace. Can you see it? Yeah. Can you get it from me? Sorry. There is a book that this man. I mean, methodologically, obviously, there's going to be some issues here, but he does a good job. This the front of this book is by Professor Mohammed Hijab. I think he's a Qatari. I don't know if he's Qatari or where he's from. But this brother here, his name is. He's a professor. His name is Naveed Sheikh. Okay, his name is Naveed Sheikh, and this is chapter 7 of the book. It's called Body Count. Okay, body count, not that kind of body count. I know what you're thinking, brother. Okay, that's a different kind of body count. Now, it's a different kind of body count. What he does is he looks at all of this. He compartmentalizes different civilizations. So he got anti-theist, Buddhist, Christian, Indic, Islamic, and then primal indigenous, and then scenic. Yeah, and he looks at all of the events, the major events in world history. Yeah, this is very interesting. And then at the end of it, he tries to rank which is the most bloody and the most vicious in terms of numbers, people that have been killed. He does have a graph, yeah. Of course you may. And look, he's got even here like Somalia, Mad Mullah Jihad in Somalia, 1899 to 19. So you know about that. You were present in that one, right? I'm only kidding. I need to get something from another country just to. Alright, yeah. For you, the Finnish Civil War. You were part of that one. And then they got the American Wars of Independence and stuff like that. Whatever.
What about for you, or something?
All right. So look, they got a minimum death toll, maximum death toll, and a median death toll. I'm not sure if anyone can see it here. Right. Very interesting. I mean, this is the methodology can always be, but it gives you a ballpark kind of understanding. At the top, you have anti-theist. 95 million people died. Anti-theist meaning he's talking about communists and all this. 95 million people died. Yeah, top. Maximum death toll 100. So it's anywhere between 95 to 152 million people. Buddhists, number 2. Well, the religion of peace that we were talking about. They weren't doing nirvana when they did that. But I mean, once again, that might have been nirvana for them, and it might have been part of their struggle, their outer struggle. Christian, that's number 3. 119 million to 236 million. Oh, you got the colonial wars. You got so many things. You got the Crusades. You got some serious things there. Then you have number 1, 2, 3, 4 is the Indic. So like here, it's including all these kind of things in Indian region, subcontinent region. And then you have the Islamic. we're not saying we top the chart, but we're definitely nowhere near the top of it. I mean, we don't say we're bottom of the chart, but we're nowhere near the top of it, right? So we're number 5, according to this guy. War and Peace in Islam. Interesting book, huh?
What page is it?
It's bookmarked. You can play with it. But you see, these are the kind of... So there's nothing unremarkable about the history of Islamic jihad, about the practice of Islamic jihad. Now, one last thing I'm going to say is this. And this is going to be the structure we're going to use for all of the Shubuhat. It's called the APECA structure. The APECA structure. Okay? And it's an acronym. Just like GO-RAP is an acronym, APECA is also an acronym. So I want to tell you the APECA structure. I want you to write it down, and then we'll call it a day for today, yeah? The APECA structure, A stands for assumption. So if someone comes with any shubha, any thing that he wants, a doubt that he wants to attack Islam, and he asks you a question, and so this has to be in the frame of them asking you a question. So now you're on the defensive. This is how you counter them, right? A stands for assumption. P stands for point. So now you make your point, and this reminds you of GCSEs and A-levels and stuff, PEE and all that. E stands for evidence. C stands for counter example. Yeah, so what they would say, yeah. And then A is for analysis. So then you come back to your own argument. So for example, give me a question that you've heard being asked about jihad. That's just any question you've heard. Yeah.
Why are so many of the terrorist groups nowadays from the Muslims?
Okay, so let me ask you, the group, what are some of the assumptions here?
Most terrorists are Muslims.
That could be an assumption.
That terrorism is linked to Islam.
There's a deeper assumption. This is very important. I'm happy we're doing this because this is where most people fail. You need to really think about A before we move on.
That Islam enables.
If you said terrorist groups, so what have they? Where have they drawn the parameters?
Yeah, so they're basically saying, when you mention terror groups, that Islam only fits that.
Before this, there's a deep assumption here. Why are most of the terrorist groups Islamic?
Terrorist groups are violent.
Or is synonym with...
Okay, go on.
That is only terrorist groups that are violent.
Okay, or that only terrorist groups should be analyzed. That's the assumption. What about terrorist states? You see, that's why it's very important. Why should the unit of analysis be what? Groups in the first place? Because you don't want to talk about Israel. Basically, that's the reason why. You don't want to talk about Israel? Then let's ask the question about terrorist groups. So it excludes it from the question. Well, you don't even want to talk about America. Why does that? Why? Okay, terrorist group. So we're not going to talk about Lee Rigby now, because that wasn't a terrorist group. That was an individual. Or why is the unit of analysis? They draw the boundaries for us, and we hook, line, and sinker. We actually answer the question. The real way to answer this question is to not accept the question in the first place or the terms of the question. You always have to assess the assumptions of the question, and don't rush to answer questions. Think what could be the assumptions here. This is very important. Very important. And then the point that you make is whatever point you want to make about states, terrorist states or whatever. And then the examples you want to give, you can give. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dresden and Hamburg. Dresden and Hamburg were situations where the RAF, Winston Churchill, they went to Germany, and it was campaigns that were targeting civilians. They were not targeting military men. They were targeting civilians. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were situations where America dropped bombs in an entire city and town. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They didn't care if there was children there or not. They knew that, in fact, they were sure there were children there, and they said, we're going to kill those children. That's what they did. When they pressed that button, they decided to kill thousands of children in a second. Now, that's not Muslims doing that. But that's also terrorism for us. That's also targeting civilians for us. That's also something we don't agree with. But why is it that when we think about terrorism, if I go to a school and I tell a child to draw a terrorist, he'll draw me and you. He won't draw, Winston Churchill. He won't bring out a £5 note and say, this is the terrorist that killed done Dresden and Hamburg. The racist terrorist that done, he also has racist remarks. No one sees him like that. They've done some really good propaganda, these guys. The racist terrorist that dropped bombs on babies. Or Harry Truman. Harry Truman, nice suit like me today. Because I was talking about jihad, so I have to come and talk about the suit. If I wear the, if I came in with the jilbab or whatever, sorry, with the what do you call it? We call it we call it the, what do you call it? The thobe, yeah. If I came in with a thobe, yeah, then maybe the image will be reinforced. The point, therefore, is that we always fall for their assumptions. And we don't look at the facts. The facts are so against them, akhi. From the Native Americans, from the killing of children. Yeah, people like John Rawls, he's a theorist, who's arguing for killing civilians and stuff. You don't need to go to Osama bin Laden. You just have to go to Harry Truman and John Rawls. You don't need to forget about Osama bin Laden for now. He had the same exact thought process when he's talking about whatever he's talking about, and Ayman al-Zawahiri, exactly the same illah as Winston Churchill. Sorry to say, I don't care what you have to say about that. Winston Churchill, yeah, has got the same illah, same exact. You cannot escape this reality. Let's go to Dresden and bomb the kids.
Who said that?
Well, I'm not saying he said that, but that's the idea.
You know, who was that lady, that American, was it Sandra? I can't remember on TV. She actually said like 500,000. Was it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, she literally calls it collateral damage. Because and they asked her, was it worth it? She goes, yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
What's her name?
Madeleine Albright. She was Secretary of State.
Okay, brilliant.
She referred to them as collateral damage.
There you have it.
And it's on YouTube to watch.
No, they asked her, was it worth it? And she goes, yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah. Tony Blair's walking around and enjoying himself. He hasn't even apologized. 1 million people died. He was part of that. This guy's a walking terrorist, sorry to say. What the hell would you want us to call him? Anyway, the point is that we always feel like we have to defend ourselves. We should. But you only defend yourself with an eye to, it's like a boxer. You only parry with an eye to counterpunch. Because if you parry and not counterpunch, you're just waiting to get hurt. And that's not what we're doing here in this country. We're not waiting to get hurt. And we should be on the counter-offensive, because we have the facts with us and we have the truth with us. And I hope everyone here has benefited from this as much as I have. We've shared a lot of information, and this is the first of many sessions like this. وجزاكم الله خيرا وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.